The Queen Consort thought she could slip away unnoticed. No press, no ceremony, just a private jet warming up on the tarmac at dawn. But what she didn't count on was the man watching from the shadows, a royal guard who'd spent 17 years learning to notice what others missed. And when he spotted something that didn't belong in her luggage, he didn't just raise an eyebrow, he sealed the entire airport. Because what he found wasn't just jewellery. It was the missing pieces of Queen Elizabeth's personal collection. Now, before we continue from the start, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what happened next didn't just ground a royal flight. It exposed a scandal that went all the way to the top of the family. And it started 2 days earlier in a place no one was supposed to look. A charity steward at Raymil House, refreshing the East drawing room, reached behind an antique cabinet for a dropped pen. Her fingers brushed against cool velvet, a case with a crest that made her stomach drop. Elizabeth II, by the grace of God. Inside lay a sapphire-studded hair ornament, the kind worn during state banquets, the kind that belonged to the crown, not hidden behind furniture in private homes. Within hours, palace archivists confirmed everyone's worst fears. A 1977 Commonwealth banquet piece, registered under sovereign possession, missing since 2019. It should never have left Windsor, let alone ended up gathering dust in someone's drawing room. The palace response was swift, but silent. No press briefings. Just encrypted calls and the quiet reactivation of the Royal Heritage Task Force. Sergeant Rowan Kellan got the call at 6:30 a.m. 17 years with the Coldstream Guards, 2 tours in Helmand, now with the Royal Collection Trust watching over things that mattered. Princess Anne's voice on the secured line was absolutely clear. Monitor every item leaving Raymil and Windsor. If it's documented, it flies. If not, it stays. The sapphire ornament had opened a wound inside the royal family. Princess Anne accused Camilla outright. Prince William said nothing. King Charles refused any statement, visibly shaken. But Rowan wasn't thinking about family dynamics. He was thinking about what else might be missing. Because the Queen Consort had a private flight booked for the end of the week. And if she tried to take anything else that didn't belong to her, Sergeant Rowan Kellan would be standing between those artifacts and international airspace. Thursday morning at Heathrow's Royal Terminal, Rowan was assigned to customs verification, processing household-class diplomatic flights. After Raymil, Princess Anne's directive was clear. Observe flight GS771. Intervene if anomalies arise. On paper, GS771 was routine, private charter to Geneva, but the timing reeked of damage control, Camilla quietly leaving the country while media speculated about the Heirlooms scandal. The first Range Rover arrived before dawn. Doors opened before the engine stopped. 2 aides emerged. Then came Camilla, grey coat, oversized sunglasses, scarf wrapped like someone trying not to be recognised. 10 pieces of luggage, all expensive, discreet, standard wealthy traveller kit. Except one medium trunk that caught Rowan's attention. The handler struggled with its weight. Wheels wouldn't turn properly. When morning light caught its surface, something metallic flashed beneath a protective cover. The trunk looked genuinely aged, hand-riveted corners, brass hardware polished countless times. And when it tilted, he glimpsed what was hidden underneath, a faded gold crest in a circular pattern. He'd seen that marking during his Windsor rotation. Legacy wing seals, reserved for the late Queen's personal items. Items that weren't supposed to leave the castle, let alone board private jets as personal luggage. The manifest listed it simply as personal effects, wardrobe and accessories. No heritage documentation, no export authorization. Camilla's nod was brief when she passed him, but Rowan caught the tension in her jaw. She knew he was watching. In 30 minutes, that plane would leave British soil, and Rowan had just spotted what looked like the second half of the Raymil scandal. The screening room was barely larger than a service closet, 2 inspection lanes, a portable scanner, and a customs bench that saw more coffee breaks than actual luggage checks. But this morning, it would become the front line of something much bigger than travel protocol. Rowan watched the procession of cases roll toward the clearance checkpoint. Designer bags sailed through without question. A jewelry pouch, cosmetics caddy, 2 wheeled wardrobes, all properly documented, all politely processed. But when they reached the suspicious trunk, one of Camilla's aides moved with sudden urgency. "This one bypasses screening," the man announced, slapping a clearance tag onto the handle. "Household exemption. Direct to aircraft." Rowan stepped forward before the customs officer could wave it through. "I'll need that case on the scanner first," he said, his tone carrying the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to raise his voice. The aide turned, early 30s, expensive suit, diplomatic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's marked exempt under Household Clause 7.3. I understand, but there's a weight discrepancy flagged in the manifest. Standard verification process." The aide hesitated. 1 beat. 2. Before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That case does not require scanning." Camilla had materialized behind them, flanked by her legal attaché and a silent assistant. Her scarf had loosened slightly, revealing a strand of pearls at her throat, but her voice carried steel wrapped in silk. Rowan turned to face her. "Mom?" Her lips curved in what might have been a smile, if it had any warmth behind it. "These are personal belongings, Sergeant, protected under diplomatic customs protocols." "I'm aware of the protocols, ma'am, but I'm required to verify any case bearing heritage markings, and this trunk displays what appears to be a royal crest. There is no basis for suspicion." "The crest suggests otherwise. Legacy wing classification requires documentation that I don't see in the manifest." Camilla's legal attaché stepped forward, voice tight with barely controlled irritation. "Sergeant, we've endured quite enough harassment from the Royal Collection's watchdogs this week. The Ray Mill incident was a simple misunderstanding, already resolved through proper channels. You are not a customs officer, you're ceremonial detail." Rowan's expression didn't shift. "Today, I'm whatever the Crown needs me to be." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush glass. Camilla moved closer, close enough that he could see the calculation behind her eyes. "If you're implying that I am smuggling, Sergeant, I would suggest you consider the consequences of that accusation." "I'm not implying anything, ma'am. I'm protecting sovereign property, especially items that have already been reported missing from secure locations." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Camilla gave a small, humorless laugh and turned away without another word. Her attaché muttered something into his phone and followed, leaving the trunk sitting beside the scanner like evidence waiting to testify. Rowan reached for the inspection override and quietly tagged the case for temporary hold. When the aide tried to protest, "This violates precedent," Rowan simply raised one hand. Then, "Today we set a new precedent." He positioned himself beside the trunk and folded his arms. Because that case wasn't just suspicious anymore, it was the key to everything, and he wasn't letting it leave the ground until someone with real authority came to claim it. The inspection room door sealed with a quiet magnetic click, leaving Rowan alone with the trunk and the weight of what he was about to discover. No ceremony, no dramatic reveal, just a man who'd learned to recognize wrong when he saw it, finally getting the chance to prove what everyone already suspected. He knelt beside the case and examined the construction, hand-stitched leather over a wooden frame, brass corners polished smooth by decades of handling, and there, partially hidden beneath a protective plastic cover, was the crest that had caught his attention. Faded gold embossing in a laurel wreath pattern, the kind reserved for the Queen's personal collection. And beneath it, etched in numbers so small they were barely visible, LWC 3049A. Rowan pulled out his encrypted tablet and accessed the heritage tracking database. The system was old, created before everything went digital, but the reference codes were still valid. He input the marking and waited. The screen flickered, processing the request through layers of security clearance. Then the result appeared, and Rowan's jaw tightened. Item status: unauthorized exit attempt recorded. Description: personal correspondence, 4 letters. Pendant, sapphire cross, Malta, 1958. Owner: sovereign custody, Queen Elizabeth II, Last authorized location, Legacy Wing, Vault 3. B. Security. Flag, recovery required. Authorized by Princess Anne. Rowan stared at the screen. This wasn't just another missing heirloom. This was the smoking gun. The Malta pendant had been listed as missing since 2022, last seen during a private dinner at Balmoral. Some assumed it had been misplaced during the chaos after the Queen's death. Others suspected it had been given away informally, a personal gift that bypassed official channels. But here it was, tucked into luggage, bound for Switzerland, under the cover of personal effects. The letters were even more significant. Personal correspondence from Queen Elizabeth to foreign heads of state, deemed historically sensitive enough to require vault storage. The kind of documents that revealed the private thoughts of a monarch, never meant for public consumption or private collection. Rowan composed a brief message to his Royal Collection contact. Item 049A, confirmed in transit. Heritage hold implemented. Prepare recovery protocol. Then he sent a second message through the encrypted household relay, the emergency channel reserved for potential scandals. Legacy case identified. Heathrow Terminal 7. Geneva departure imminent. Heritage violation confirmed. Requesting immediate oversight. He signed it with his service number and set the tablet aside. No accusations, no dramatics. Just facts delivered to people who would know exactly what to do with them. Because if that trunk made it onto Swiss soil, there would be no legal recourse. Once those items crossed into international jurisdiction under diplomatic protection, the Crown's authority ended. The public would never know. History would never get them back. Rowan placed one hand gently on the trunk's surface, not claiming it, just protecting it. Because someone was going to have to go through him to steal a piece of Queen Elizabeth's legacy, and after 17 years of service, he was more than ready for that fight. The confrontation came faster than expected. Rowan had barely finished documenting the trunk's serial numbers when Oliver Grant, Camilla's legal attaché, swept into the inspection room with all the righteous fury of someone accustomed to getting his way. "We're prepared to sign liability waivers absolving security of any responsibility," Grant announced, producing papers from his briefcase. "You've made your point, Sergeant. Now release the case so we can proceed with departure." Rowan didn't look up from his tablet. "The case has been flagged under Protocol S4B, heritage verification required before international transport." Grant blinked. "That protocol hasn't been activated in decades. Doesn't invalidate its authority. It's designed for suspected foreign interference in royal exports." Rowan finally looked up, meeting Grant's stare with uncomfortable directness. "When someone attempts to export sealed sovereign property without authorization, I'd say the interference is definitely foreign to proper protocol." Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice to what he probably thought was an intimidating whisper. "You realize this is a royal departure. You're obstructing a sovereign's travel." "No," Rowan replied calmly. "I'm temporarily holding a single item pending verification. The passenger is free to board whenever she chooses. The plane can take off on schedule, just not with this particular trunk." The silence stretched between them, thick with implications neither man wanted to voice directly. "I'm not here to create scenes," Rowan continued, "but if that case leaves this terminal without proper heritage clearance, I'll be filing an official breach report. And once that enters the Royal Archive system, the discretion you're counting on evaporates completely." Grant's face darkened. "You're playing a very dangerous game, Sergeant." "I'm not playing anything. I'm protecting what belongs to the Crown, not to any individual member of the royal family." Grant turned and stalked from the room, phone already at his ear. Rowan activated the Heritage Hold protocol on his tablet, triggering a cascade of silent security measures throughout the terminal's computer systems. Nothing visible to passengers or staff, but every access request for that trunk would now bounce into quarantine. The case was effectively frozen in place until someone with Crown-level authority could override the lock. He typed one final message into the encrypted relay. "Legacy trunk confirmed. Heritage violation documented. Hold active. Awaiting authority. Sergeant R. Kellen." Then he stood back and waited. He didn't have political power. He didn't have media connections or royal bloodlines. All he had was 17 years of service, 2 combat tours, and one unshakable principle learned in places where principles mattered more than protocol. When you see something wrong, you don't let it walk away. Not until someone with more authority than you tells you to step aside. And even then, you don't move easy. The knock on the inspection room door wasn't dramatic, just 3 firm raps that somehow carried more authority than all of Grant's bluster combined. When the door opened, Queen Camilla herself stepped through. She entered without announcement, flanked by Grant and a younger assistant, carrying what looked like a legal brief. Her heels clicked against the tile floor with the precision of someone who'd learned to command attention through presence alone. For a woman supposedly fleeing scandal, she moved with the practiced confidence of someone still very much in control. "You've created quite the delay, Sergeant," she said, scanning the inspection table where the trunk sat unopened. "I'm curious what you think you're accomplishing." Rowan stood beside the case, hands clasped behind his back in parade rest. "Heritage verification hold has been initiated under Protocol S4B, ma'am." Camilla's smile carried all the warmth of a winter morning. "You're aware that household luggage is exempt from such scrutiny?" "Yes, ma'am. But this trunk isn't listed under standard household inventory. It bears legacy wing markings that match an item recently recovered at Raymill House, an item that was never authorized for personal relocation." Grant stepped forward again. "We've already explained that the previous issue was a filing error, an administrative oversight that's been corrected. That oversight," Rowan said, without taking his eyes off Camilla, "resulted in the Crown recovering property that's been under sovereign protection since 1990. This case bears identical classification markings." Camilla moved closer, studying his face with the intensity of someone trying to read a foreign language. "And you believe I am attempting to smuggle Crown property out of the country?" "I haven't accused anyone of anything specific," Rowan replied carefully, "but I've documented the markings, noted the weight inconsistencies, and triggered verification protocols to prevent another oversight." "This is deeply insulting," Camilla said, turning toward the security camera mounted in the corner. "An insult that will have consequences." Rowan remained silent. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Grant glanced at his watch. "Departure is scheduled in 18 minutes. Camilla's voice dropped to near freezing temperatures. "Then I suggest you release this case immediately before your career becomes the next casualty of this family's internal paranoia." Rowan met her stare without flinching. "I'm not here for a career, ma'am. I'm here for the Crown." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. For a moment, it seemed like something might snap. An order shouted, a threat made real, a line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Instead, Rowan took a quiet step backward and placed one hand gently on top of the trunk. Not threatening, not claiming ownership, just positioning himself between the case and anyone who might try to move it. Camilla's voice dropped to a whisper that only he could hear. "You think a uniform and a protocol manual can stop me?" Rowan's response was equally quiet. "I think 20 minutes can." She stared at him for what felt like an hour, then turned and swept from the room without another word, her coat trailing behind her like a drawn curtain. Grant followed, muttering urgently into his phone, frustration radiating from every gesture. Rowan remained alone with the trunk, and the certainty that he'd just crossed a line there was no coming back from. But sometimes, holding the line meant saying nothing at all, just standing between history and the hands trying to rewrite it. The Royal Terminal's perimeter gate didn't announce arrivals with fanfare or ceremony. It simply opened, quietly, efficiently, allowing passage for a single black Range Rover with no diplomatic plates, no escort vehicles, and no visible security detail. Rowan caught the movement through the observation window and felt his spine straighten instinctively. Princess Anne had arrived. She stepped from the vehicle alone. No entourage, no press officers, no ceremonial anything. Just a long dark coat, buttoned to the throat, leather gloves, and a red folder tucked under her arm like evidence waiting to be presented. Her footsteps echoed through the secure corridor with the measured rhythm of someone who'd never needed to hurry because doors opened when she approached them. She found Rowan in the inspection room, still standing beside the trunk like a guardian over something precious. "Sergeant!" He came to full attention. "Ma'am?" Her eyes swept the room, taking in the sealed case, the scattered paperwork, the tablet still displaying heritage violation warnings. "Status report." "One trunk flagged during outbound screening," Rowan replied crisply. "Heritage markings confirmed as Legacy Wing Class 3. Manifest documentation insufficient. Scanning protocols were bypassed under false authority. S4B, hold implemented. Case contents match item 049A from the vault system." Anne nodded once. Camilla's response: refused verification initially, then attempted to override the hold through legal pressure. Threatened career consequences for obstruction. "Did you examine the contents?" "Negative, ma'am." Awaiting proper authorization, Anne stepped toward the inspection table. "Then let's see what we're dealing with." She didn't wait for clearance or ceremony. She simply set her red folder on the table and opened it, revealing 3 pages of aged documentation, Queen Elizabeth's personal inventory sheets, each one marked with the former monarch's distinctive handwriting. She selected one sheet and held it up to the light. "Item 049A, she read aloud. "Sapphire pendant, Malta diplomatic gift, 1958. Worn once during Commonwealth tour. Accompanied by personal correspondence deemed historically significant. Vault classification, Legacy Wing, Section 3B. Authorization note." She paused, reading her mother's handwriting. "Not to leave British soil without Crown consent." She looked at Rowan. "Verify the markings." Rowan angled the trunk toward the overhead light, exposing the crest beneath its protective covering. "Confirmed match, gold laurel pattern, outer rim showing age wear, serial numbers correspond to vault documentation." Anne exhaled slowly. "Exactly like the piece recovered at Ray Mill." The door opened before she could continue. Camilla entered without knocking, Oliver Grant close behind. She stopped abruptly when she saw Anne standing beside the opened documentation. Anne spoke before Camilla could say a word. "We recovered one heirloom from your private estate. You never reported it missing. You never explained how it got there. And now a second case, with matching markings, matching vault classifications, is being moved out of the country under false documentation." Camilla's composure cracked slightly. "Those items were personal effects, given to me privately by the Queen herself during informal moments. They were never part of official state collections." Anne held up the inventory sheet, her mother's handwriting clearly visible. "Then perhaps you can explain why they're still listed here." "In mother's own hand, with explicit instructions that they remain under Crown protection." Grant tried to intervene. "Your Royal Highness, with respect." Anne didn't even glance at him. "The trunk stays." Camilla's mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came out. Rowan stood motionless beside the case, watching history unfold in real time. Because for the first time since the Ray Mill scandal broke, someone with real power had entered the room. And now everything was about to change. The silence in the inspection room felt brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest wrong word. Princess Anne broke it with surgical precision. "Sergeant Kellen," she said, eyes never leaving Camilla's face. "Open the trunk." Rowan moved without hesitation. No ceremony, no drama. Just the quiet efficiency of someone following legitimate orders. The brass latches released with soft clicks, and the lid lifted to reveal a carefully organized interior lined with cream silk. The contents took everyone's breath away. 4 letters lay in archival sleeves, their envelopes bearing the unmistakable handwriting of Queen Elizabeth II. Personal correspondence that had disappeared from secure storage, now packed between scarves like contraband, and nestled in the centre, wrapped in protective cloth, was the sapphire cross of Malta. The pendant caught the fluorescent light and threw it back in brilliant blue fragments. A diplomatic gift from 1958, once worn during a Commonwealth tour, now reduced to smuggled luggage. Its setting was unmistakably handcrafted from the early 1950s, irreplaceable, irreproducible, and absolutely irreplaceable. Anne reached into her folder and withdrew the corresponding inventory page. "Mother's own documentation," she said, holding the handwritten sheet where everyone could see it. Quote, "Malta pendant and associated correspondence to remain with archival collection, not to be exported, gifted, or divided from Crown holdings." Underlined twice. Camilla said nothing. Her face had gone pale, but her chin remained raised in defiant silence. Grant made one last attempt. "Your Royal Highness, there's no evidence of criminal intent." These could have been confused with other items after the Queen's passing. Administrative errors happened during transitions. "They weren't confused," Anne interrupted, her voice cutting through his excuses like a blade. "They were removed. One piece ended up hidden at Raymill. This collection was about to be flown to Switzerland. Both sets belonged to the Crown, not to any individual." Rowan began documenting each item with methodical precision. Archival gloves, custody envelopes, photographic evidence, everything needed to establish an unbreakable chain of custody. He handled the letters as if they were made of spider silk, each one representing not just historical value, but the private thoughts of a monarch. The pendant went into a specialised recovery case marked "Property of the Sovereign Estate." Not once did anyone try to stop him, because this was no longer a dispute about ownership. This was evidence. Anne turned to the senior security officer who had appeared at the door. "These items are to be transported to Windsor under Crown custody protocols. Sergeant Kellen will accompany them. Full documentation, unbroken chain of custody. Nothing leaves this terminal without proper authorization." "Yes, ma'am." As Rowan sealed the final container, Camilla remained motionless, not dismissed, but no longer relevant to the conversation. Anne stepped closer to her sister-in-law, close enough that her words were meant for Camilla alone. "Mother trusted you to walk beside the Crown," she said quietly, "not to take pieces of it when you thought no one was watching." Then she collected her folder, turned and walked from the room with the same quiet authority that had brought her there. No guards, no ceremony, no threats, just finality. Rowan secured the last seal on the evidence containers and stepped back. The case was closed, in every sense of the word. The jet engines were already spinning up to take off power by the time Sergeant Rowan Kellen emerged from the terminal. But this time there was no urgency in his movements, no tension in his shoulders. The heritage items had been secured, documented, and loaded into a Crown security van, now idling just beyond the service entrance. A second officer from Windsor was waiting inside with the updated custody file, each one stamped and signed by Princess Anne herself. Mission accomplished. Heirlooms recovered. Letters secured. Legacy protected. The flight would depart on schedule, but it would leave something important behind. Rowan turned to watch Queen Camilla re-emerge from the inspection corridor. She still carried herself with royal bearing, spine straight, head high, movements controlled. But something had been stripped away that couldn't be seen from the outside. Authority, perhaps. Or simply the confidence that comes from believing rules don't apply to you. Her remaining aides flanked her like nervous shadows, no longer giving orders, only taking them. She climbed the aircraft stairs without speaking, her heels striking the metal steps with deliberate precision. At the top, she paused. Not to wave or acknowledge anyone, but simply to collect herself before disappearing into the cabin. The door sealed shut behind her with pneumatic finality. Oliver Grant didn't follow immediately. He stood on the tarmac, speaking in clipped tones with ground crew, his eyes occasionally flicking toward Rowan. But the fire was gone. The legal threats had evaporated. All that remained was the practical business of departure. Rowan didn't acknowledge his stare. He was already walking toward the Range Rover, parked beyond the security perimeter, where Princess Anne waited beside the open door. She offered him the briefest nod of acknowledgement as he approached. "You held the line," she said simply. Rowan considered this for a moment. She tried to turn history into luggage. Anne's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. History doesn't travel without consequences. Behind them, The jet's engines reached full power, and the aircraft began its taxi toward the runway. Rowan turned to watch its progress. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet departure under a sky that had finally decided to brighten. Camilla was leaving. The public would never know the full story, not immediately, probably not ever. There would be speculation, carefully worded statements, and the usual dance of royal crisis management. But what mattered was still here, on British soil, under the protection of people who understood that duty didn't always come with headlines. Anne stepped into the Range Rover without ceremony. The door closed. The engine turned over quietly, and the vehicle pulled away from the terminal as unobtrusively as it had arrived. Rowan remained on the tarmac until the aircraft's wheels left the ground and its lights disappeared into the morning sky. Only then did he allow himself one deep breath. Not pride, not victory, just the quiet satisfaction that comes from doing what's right when no one's watching. Because in the end, he hadn't saved a person or prevented a crisis. He'd prevented the theft of a legacy. And sometimes that was exactly enough. Dash, dash, dash. Should a royal guard have the authority to stop a queen's luggage to protect crown heritage? Was Princess Anne justified in personally intervening to recover those artifacts? And if you were standing in Sergeant Rowan Kellen's position, would you have risked everything to hold that line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you believe what Sergeant Kellen did was right, standing for duty over convenience, for heritage over hierarchy, then hit that like button now. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, so you never miss the stories that reveal what really happens behind the Crown's most carefully guarded doors. Share this with someone who believes Queen Elizabeth's legacy was never meant to be hidden away in private collections or smuggled across borders. And if you're still here, you're exactly the kind of viewer we create these stories for. So click the next video on your screen. We'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves sometimes the most important battles are fought quietly by people who never seek credit for winning them.